Speaking of the Hispanic child, this morning has become, this fellow we're going to have next is our go-to guy when it comes to effective ways in engaging the Hispanic community. Aurelio Montemayor, who I met 8 years ago, we sat on the board together. He's a senior education advocate and a lead trainer for the Intercultural Development Research Association. From his home base in South Texas, he brings extensive experience in working with Hispanic school personnel, parents, and students. His career in education spans 4 decades and has included teaching at the high school levels. He currently is on the National PTA Field Services Committee and served as a National PTA board member from 2006 to 2010. Mr. Montemayor believes in the power of community engagement to foster leadership development and effective education. He received his bachelor's degree in English from St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, and his master's degree in bilingual education from Antioch Graduate School of Education in Ohio. Please join me in welcoming a true friend and outstanding advocate, Aurelio Montemayor.
Good morning. I gotta switch this thing on. Okay. You have on your tables my PowerPoint, so get the notes. We're gonna have some interaction. What a wonderful view. At this Emerging Minority Leadership Conference, it's important we understand the shift from parent involvement to family engagement. Whenever we want to introduce a new concept within an area that's already known in a particular way, we change the word so that the word means a difference. And so parent involvement has a long, long history. We use the word family because we're all clear that those that are responsible for children are more than just the parents. In many situations, it might be a grandmother, an uncle, a neighbor, a foster parent. And so we want to make sure that it identifies the people we're talking about. But those that are responsible for providing for those children, for protecting them, are the ones we're focusing on. But we're also changing the word involvement to engagement for many reasons. It implies something new, something different. So today we're going to make some contrasts, and I don't want anybody to feel hurt about the contrast, because not a matter saying what was before was bad and what's new is good. We obviously all learn from our experience, and collectively as organizations we learn from our experience. So we're going to do some comparisons and contrasting that by the nature of simplification are going to leave out a lot of other things that are being done that are already part of the new, or what I'm saying is the new paradigm. Don't take hurt about it, but also know that for some of us, the involvement and the engagement has not been there at all. It just hasn't happened. And so I want you to look at the 3 objectives for today at your table. And also, if you haven't introduced yourself to the people at the table, share this. What's a successful experience you've had in engaging parents in education? So do that very quickly at your table right now. Chat with each other about this. Whoever starts, just jump in. Don't think about it very deeply. Your attention, please. Who has not had a chance to share at your table yet? Raise your hand. Who has not had a chance to share yet? Okay. What's one parent activity? What's your answer to the question I gave you?
The school that I worked at, we have a large population of Haitian families. The school that I worked at, we have a large population of Haitian families who were not coming into the school, so I took the school to their community,
How?
engaged them. I invited the principal, the administrators, the guidance counselor, teachers, and we engaged.
You went into the community. All right. Somebody else has not had a chance to share at your table.
Hi, I'm Brenda Martin out of Kentucky. We had a couple of workshops where we invited parents and teachers to help them to understand the Common Core standards and the new testing techniques and everything, and interpreting those scores and what it means and what it does not mean. So we did that, but one of the things we did, we took it into a minority church, and we got a lot of minority parents, so that was really exciting, yes.
Okay, two very good examples. Somebody else that hasn't had a chance to share at your table. Raise your hand, I can't see. Okay. I'm going to lose a pound here.
I'll stand up. I work for Great Education Colorado in education policy, and we had a day at the Capitol in which we were trying to push on our legislators to find wise increased investment in public education, and we had well over 200 folks attend at the Capitol and pulling their legislators off the Capitol as well and expressing why this was important to them as it relates to their constituency.
Excellent. Those are excellent examples. I wanted to give you a chance to listen to each other. Some of the tables, there's so many people at the table, obviously some people weren't going to get a chance to share. One of the things that is an important common thread in what I was hearing is, rather than bringing people to a thing, you go to them somewhere. And that's very important. The traditional mode for PTA is something happens on a campus, you have a meeting, and you invite parents to come to your meeting. So going out there is important. The other piece is explaining policy in an understandable way. Very important. Now, traditionally, God, these things moved all over the place. Okay. Would you do it for me? Can you, or do I control it here? Okay, get up to my third slide. We're way into it. Go back to the beginning. More? Okay. Your successful experiences here, because of the nature of this group, are going to reveal a little bit more to PTA, to the tradition of PTA, of what we need to do to engage the unengaged, to reach out to the underserved populations. But even those terms are already negative. We're doing something right, and we have to get them involved in what we're doing that's right. The traditions of PTA, which I honor, move up, voluntarism, parents as volunteers for schools. How many of you have been in PTA 5 years or more? Raise your hand. Could you count the number of hours that you've given as volunteers? Some of you probably have pins that you were given because you were the super mom. Some principals can't do anything without you, and that's good. But you're volunteers to the campus. Of course, if you're a working mom, single working mom, it's a little bit difficult to give those volunteer hours because you're trying to put food on the table and just make sure you've got the rent money. Now, that means that you can't be that kind of a PTA person. Fundraising. How many of you have raised funds for your school or campus? How many of you have helped raise thousands of dollars for your schools? Okay. Our schools depend on that. But you know, in Texas, we have a very inequitable way of funding schools. And if all the PTA volunteers in Texas had spent, instead of selling cupcakes or whatever it is they used to raise money, had been pushing the legislature to fund schools equitably and fully, we'd have a lot more money. Because I see a lot of brilliant and energetic moms, and it's mostly moms. I think we're kind of shifting it so that the men are taking more responsibility, but still, it's predominantly moms and grandmas that are helping the schools at the local level do what the state hasn't done, nor have they helped create a public will to have fully funded schools for all children. That's harder. And if I use your talent and energy to keep you busy doing this, and I'm a state policymaker, I would rather have you do that than knocking on my door, because I don't want to fund schools fully. Now, PTA at the state and national level is obviously very aware of policy and does a lot of things about policy. I was just talking with one of our ex-state presidents when she invited me to be at a press conference 3 years ago to tell the governor, hey, you've got a pot of money there, use it for schools. For the first time in the history of our state, they defunded our schools. They cut over $6 billion from our schools. They said 5, but there was another pot of money they cut out. So it was over $6 billion, and it mostly affected all schools. It's still affecting them. But now the legislators, they put a little bit of the money back in, but they're saying, hey, they made it with that short fund. That means they were overstaffed. There was a lot of fat on staff. So I've got kids right now in school. I'm mentoring one nephew who is in an advanced calculus class, and the teacher has 32 students in that class. The government AP course teacher has an average of 30 students per class and still hasn't gotten his basic textbook for his class. Schools are crowded, underfunded, with not the faculty they need, and it's basically a money issue. What's really funny is when we've taken the state to court, the rich schools say, money doesn't make a difference as long as you don't take any away from us. There are many, many issues in education, including the quality of teaching, but money is a fundamental one. And there are some states in this country that have a rational, equitable way of funding schools, but the most still don't. And the kids most hurt by this are poor and minority kids. Brown and black kids are really hit hard. But also poor whites. I mean, everybody gets hit. So fundraising, I think, as a traditional one, the traditional one is great. You do a lot of good work. It's well-deserved use of money, but it's not the new paradigm. And then parenting, how to be a better parent. Who is a parent of teenagers that doesn't want help? You know, sure, that's important. But with poor and minority parents, it's kind of like fix what's broken. They aren't really good parents. You know what I mean? So traditional Title I, next. The work in my organization and our work for the last 40 years have been focusing on schools that are predominantly of economically disadvantaged families. So Title I, since 1966, has already had a piece that's very interesting. The federal money that comes to schools, which in many cases is a big chunk of money, brings with it some responsibilities about parent involvement. And under No Child Left Behind, each campus principal had 51 or 52 different things to check off in terms of parent involvement. And as we worked with the schools about that, what we basically see is bring the parents in to give them information. Basically, I as the principal, I as the representative of this academic institution need to let you know about report cards and grades. Not a bad idea. But the vision of Title I had nothing to do with parenting, raising money, or volunteerism. It has to do with informing you as parents, signing off as a committee, being on committees. And the Title I staff, the parent liaisons paid out of Title I, their key thing was, how do I get 30 warm bodies in the room? I need for them to sign in and check off so that I did my part. And most of the time, it's a boring presentation with slides about whatever it is. The more creative ones would make it a little bit participatory. But still, it wasn't about critical thinking and dialogue. It's about me giving you information. So those are two traditional modes, the traditional PTA mode, and again I say many have done more than that, but the traditional mode and how the non-PTA world sees PTA, how the non-education world sees what happens in schools. You either inform them about rules or you bring them in to do something to raise money. So next slide. The paradigm of family leadership in education. Family leadership. First of all, that there is data that these families have that they can take action on, which means, Sharon, not dumbing it down, but making it understandable. The non-education world, the world of lay people, have a lot of trouble with our jargon and our data. I just sat in at a parents' night at a high school 3 weeks ago, where the principal gave us 10 slides that had all these tables about how the school had done and other stuff. It was so far and so keystoned, you couldn't really read it. And he spoke so fast that even I, who know a lot of this stuff, didn't know what the hell he was talking about. And I was surrounded by many parents whose first language was Spanish and their grasp of English was fairly limited. He used Spanish to greet us and then to say goodbye. But when he was talking about those tables, so that wasn't actionable data. It's data that you can handle, see, and use. Number two is not the super mom, and without stepping on any toes, it's the collective group, those families around that campus that are going to keep the doors open and keep it excellent before that private company sets up another one in there next door. Collective leadership, revolving leadership, and that leadership is more than just the person that's the president or speaks at the top, that the whole community works with each other. The two maiden aunts that prepare the breakfast for the meeting, the lady that went and invited 3 people to come, she never speaks in the meeting, but she brought 3 people with her. And when you consider that attendance at parent meetings is critical, and then you say, well, we invite them, we had door prizes, and nobody came. These parents don't came. And I worked so hard, I went to all the grocery stores, they gave me coupons, and we had food for them, and very few people came. How did you tell them? Oh, I gave him a paper. The kid took a paper home, and you pinned it to his backpack, and that's how we invited him. We did it in English and in Spanish. Right. When we're talking about family leadership, we're talking about families really doing what they want to do. Not as teachers. I don't want to have a little teacher at home and teach her how to read. So, the research in parent involvement doesn't help us because if you look at the research, a lot of it says if the mom is literate, the kid is literate. So let's make the mom literate, and then that helps the school. BS. A lot of us come from not literate families or families that weren't literate in English, and they didn't do squat but make sure we did our homework and went to school, and we came out with honors. Because family leadership, first of all, removes that lens that says, oh, those poor families. What do you expect? That poor mom, she's had kids from 3 men. What are you going to do? Bullshit. Those are adults. Those are adults that want their kids to get the best education possible. Because where I grew up in Laredo on the border with Mexico, the broken record was, edúcate para que no sufras lo que sufrí yo. Get an education so you don't go through the shit I went through. And they have respect. They think school does know better. They really think that we in school, they don't know that when the kid was in 5th grade, I already had him, oh, this kid's never going to make it to college. This thing called, we're going to call them endorsements in Texas now, but it's tracking. And if you're old enough, you remember we used to have Mickey Mouse math for all those kids, and girls too, because their brain couldn't handle math and science. We've kind of solved that one. To an extent. We still don't pay them what they're worth, but at least we think that they can become scientists and lawyers and maybe presidents of the United States. But collective leadership assumes intelligence and assertiveness. You go any of those kitchens, you'll see that. It's just that when she comes to school, that assertiveness is lost. Coming through those gates into an environment that is not very inviting and reminds the person of failure and limitation is not the best context to have a peer sitting across from a teacher, counselor, or principal saying, my kid's flunking math, I want to see what we can do about that. I don't want him to give up, because when that little switch, when the hope is lost like last night, when the switch goes out, as a teacher I tell you, it's very hard to turn that switch back on. Because the damage, the internalized oppression is a recording in our head that I'm dumb, limited, or somehow not good. And the projects that family leadership does, the projects that they do, are about school policy and practice. And the principal wants them to raise money because he needs 3 more computers. That's okay. What family leadership is focused on, we'll find the parents that want to do that and let them do that. But our leadership team is really, really interested in those things. You have on your slides there, flip to the next one, please. Okay, 6 principles, 2 on each slide. At each of your tables, I want you to choose one of those 3 slides and just talk about why we need to write these principles, why we even have to consider them. There are 6 principles. So look at those. It's the next 3 slides. First one and the next 2 say continued. Look at those 6 principles. Pick one of those slides at the table and just talk about those 2 principles, why those principles are important, or why even they need to be stated. Okay? Go. Okay, is there a table that wants to report that focused on the very first one? No, go back to the original slide. First one. One more. No, back, that one. The first slide on principles. Back one, right there. A table, just raise your hand, we'll take the mic for you. Want to report on families can be their children's strongest advocates. Any table wants to report on that? Raise your hand. Okay, take the mic over there. It's the elevator talk, right? I'm talking into this thing.
Good morning. I'm Vanita Bennett from Kentucky. Our table reported on families can be their children's strongest advocates. And some of the things that we mentioned was, one thing in particular was attending board meetings. And Venezuela from Ohio was saying how they have a lot of support at the school board meetings. And we talked about how PTA can actually train some of the parents to know what to do at these board meetings so they can be effective in promoting change and be important decision makers. We talked about, being partnerships with, formal partnerships with these school boards so that we even have like a PTA following on the school board website where people know what's going on, what the agenda is, and what they're advocating for.
That's great. Policy issues. Thank you very much. Give her a hand. Give the table a hand. Okay. Did any table focus on families of different race, ethnicity, language, and class are equally valuable? Any table focus on that one? Okay. The elevator talk. That's what you call the short one, right? Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Julius. I'm from Washington, D.C. And one of the things that we talked about when it comes to families of different races all being equal is the standard thing that we deal with, I think, in every school across the country, where we have educators and people inviting us to the table to talk about our children. One of the things we're doing in Washington, D.C. is reminding them it's not your table, it's our table. We, as parents, give the most important thing in our lives to each and every educator every day. And it is imperative for them to understand that when we're talking, that we're not trying to talk down to you, don't talk down to us. We want to advocate for you and help you. We want to support you, not supplant you. So give us the tools that we need, tell us what's wrong, and where you can't fight that struggle, we as PTA and PTA parents can go in and fight that struggle for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next slide. Families care about their children's education and are to be treated with respect, dignity, and value. Did any table that hasn't spoken focus on that and wants to talk about it? Oh, back there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Hinsky with California, or from California. Our table talked about, and Anita and Kamal here and I all pretty much concurred that, and this sounds kind of cheesy, but the thing that we need to do most in connecting people is just really having a loving environment. And that means at school, at home, whatever we do. And that's really what a lot of times the families and the kids are lacking, is just this feeling of love and connectedness. It's pretty simple, back to basics.
Okay, thank you. Within that context, it's important, the feelings are very important, but within that context is that we look at the intelligence and persistence of these families. That equality, that not only we admire or say, yeah, you speak differently than I do, you eat different food, whatever it is, but we're both intelligent and strong, and all of us want our kids to have a good education. Because I used to do, many years ago, a lot of workshops on culture and all that kind of stuff. Not to belittle it, but we might never break bread together. You might never know what church I go to if I go to church. But we're both together here to make sure our kids get an excellent education in that neighborhood public school. And so the respect and dignity is not just for my culture, whatever that is, and however you define it, but it's like we're here to defend and advocate that every kid, they get the best possible education. And I think that built into that, if I have trouble with the way you look or what you say or church you go to, I have to set that aside. We don't have to agree on the other stuff. And if someday we break bread together and our families become friends, that's great. But it's not about that, okay? Thank you. Okay, next, let's see. Next one is, within families, many individuals play a role in the children's education. Let's bring the mic over here.
Good morning. I'm Kenneth Williams from Charleston, West Virginia. Our table actually talked about the first one, families becoming advocates for their children. In Charleston, West Virginia, PTA does not have that much of a strong stake in kids' education. For some of you who probably don't know, West Virginia, we're probably one of the lowest performing schools in the country. And as I looked at PTA and schools that have PTA, those low performing schools, there are no PTAs in those schools. And everybody's wondering why we have low performing schools. I'm like, well, you're missing a major part of the school is the PTA. So as we discussed at our table and everybody had some input on how that actually works, one of the challenges that I stated at our table is that being able to promote and market PTA as one of those viable solutions to help kids raise test scores, raise their grade levels and their educational attainment levels in order not to be that low performing school. And the only way to do that is to have a very strong, trained, educated PTA program in your school throughout our state. And
Okay, I'll speak to that when I talk about another model. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did any table actually focus on this one? Give you a chance to speak, okay. But I wanted somebody to speak to this principle. Within families, many individuals play a role in the children's education. And don't raise your hand if you just want to talk, if you're not going to talk to this one. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we spent some time talking about this one, and we focused on the families and the individuals playing a role in the education, but what we really focused on when we had our conversation here is the language of education. That the language of education has to be a common or a shared language, so it can't be all teacherese or educatorese, that we need to make sure before we have a conversation or a dialogue that we're real deliberate and inclusive, that we make sure that we can all talk and not one person talk and the other listen. So it's all about not using the alphabet soup thing, not assuming that a report card is easily accessible with all those crazy standard languages and stuff like that, that it really is about education with the little e and dialogue or conversation with a big C or a big D, so that everyone can be involved in the conversation, right? Did I get it right?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Next slide, please. Family leadership is most powerful in improving education for all children when collective efforts create solutions for the common good. Who wants to speak to that one that hasn't spoken? Okay. I could be losing weight if I was doing
So we talked about this. I'm David Heredia, I'm a former California State PTA. I recently moved to Maryland probably like a month and a week ago. I I think that I learned something within the last 3 weeks, because my daughter that went from kindergarten, she kept on telling me, Daddy, we're going to have an ice cream social. Can you take me? Daddy, we're going to have an ice cream social. Can you take me? And I realized that, I don't know if it was because I was in East LA and it was a struggle working with the principal and working with the staff and trying to get a lot of parents. And I don't know if it was because we were in a low-income area. Ellicott City, in the spot that I'm at, it's a little more well-off than I'm used to. But the thing that I liked about the event that they had is that they give you a ticket as soon as you came in, and then they had like, if they want to put stickers on a certain section, and there was a lady from India, she was doing it. If you wanted to make coloring books, there was a lady from Jamaica that was there. Just the culture that was around Maryland, I could guarantee you, and I can't even name all of them, but I'm going to say 15 different cultures that were there, all part of having the kids. They had a section with a DJ that was playing the Slide to the Left, you know what I mean? And then they had the Cotton Eye Joe, and the most beautiful thing, and I didn't want to seem weird recording the whole thing, because that was my dream of what I thought the PTA should be, because my daughter was the one that was taking me to meet another parent, because that was a classmate of hers, and the interaction was everywhere else, and the more that I saw, it was the children. The value was because they said, regardless of all the differences that we have, all of our kids are special and valued, and let's not contaminate their mind right now. Let's just have them engage with themselves and have a good time here, and hopefully by the end of the day you made 2-3 new friends that your children are going to help you interact with, because that's their friend in their classroom. And I took that a lot more deeper than anything so far, and I think that's where we have to get to, and that's how we all get together for the rights of all of our children.
Thank you. That example is also very good for the earlier one, where families across cultures are all valuable. But when we think of collective action, in Texas last spring, we had a huge coming together of many organizations and families called Save Texas Schools to change certain policies that were very damaging to children. One was the excessive use of high-stakes testing. And because of collective action, that was reduced. We have other challenges, but that was certainly a collective action. And when we think about collective action and family leadership, we're talking about families coming together to have the powerful lever of changing policy and practice. If there's certain practice that's making most of our kids fail math, how can we help change that practice so that there's math for the masses? Bob Moses. Do anybody here know about Bob Moses and his algebra project? You know what it is about? Bob Moses, he had another name during the movement days in the 60s, but he was a math teacher who became an activist, a very strong activist, put his life on the line during the civil rights marches in the South. And he went back, I think, to Chicago and said, you know, a clear education civil right that our children have is to learn higher math. And too many black children, a vast majority of black children, are considered incapable, and their families, of handling algebra. It's too abstract. And we hear that. We need collective action to change a deeply embedded idea that higher math is only for 10% of the population. There are other countries that make it a lie, a myth. So when it comes to especially black and brown boys' achievement in school, look at their math and science. So in Texas now we've opened it up so they have other choices, which means they don't have to take Algebra 2. Well, I know that for a small part of the population that's brilliant but can't handle math, that's all right. If I'm a middle-class parent, I'll get the tutoring for my kids so they can make the basic math requirements and they go off and major in world art or writing. But the fact is that the notion that very few brains can handle pre-calculus already is set in every math department in this country, in high schools. If there's no collective action from families to try and change that, it's just like saying that girls are inferior to boys and they can't be scientists or mathematicians or presidents of the United States. So, collective action is, in this case, is focusing on those tough policy and program issues, where families understand what the issue is and take action on it, hopefully to change the policy. Okay, who dealt with family, schools, and communities when drawn together become a strong, sustainable voice to protect the rights of all children? Okay, Mike. I changed your name.
My name's Mike. My name is Ernest Moore from Prince George's County, Maryland. Actually, we are part of the UFRN team, the Family Engagement Network. Years ago, our individual community used to be self-sustaining. Actually, when your child left your house, your mother would put you in your clothes, send you out with your lunch. As you walk to school, your neighborhood school, your neighbors would actually speak to you, tell you have a good day, make sure you stay on the sidewalk, hold your hand, pick up your book bags, don't do those things. And when you got to school, you principals right at that thing, good morning, how you doing? Go to your classroom. And you went in your classroom, you acted up, your teacher would say, no, go sit over here, and you did that. And on your way home, you could stop at your neighborhood store, and your neighborhood store manager knew your name and knew your parents' name. So you already knew you couldn't act up no matter where you went. But now we have gotten into society where we just get up in the morning, drive out of a garage, never speak to our neighbors, never go to our local stores, never go to our local schools unless there's an issue or problem. Society hasn't changed, we have. So the only thing we have to do is all of a sudden take these same families and empower them that says, you have a community that you purchased a house in, find out what's in your community, talk to your neighbors. You have a neighborhood school, even if your child is bused out of your community, it affects you because your child still goes to your neighborhood school, and if we don't educate them, they can't come back to be empowered to purchase in that same community you are. So our individual community today has to get back as individuals, start doing that dialogue. Because when we do that, our children see that. If our children see that, they'll start reacting to what we do. Our children see more things than what they actually ask them to do. So they're gonna do what we do. If they don't see us being nice, they're not gonna be nice. If they don't see us come to the school, they're not gonna go. And they're gonna grow up to be adults to just the same thing that they're seeing us do. So we have to get that same community back into that same sustainment, which we can do, because that's why we're all here. That's why we're all here. So when we leave here, remember, this is Washington, D.C. We're going back to our own communities. When we get in our community, what are we gonna do what we learned today? We're gonna have to educate someone else to be empowered with what we do, and sooner or later we can find a whole network, and that's what PTAs has done for us.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, ma'am. You want to speak? You've got the mic.
I have to say, because all such good ideas came from my group, and they're from Arizona, Georgia, Colorado. I'm Yoksim Gunaratne from Fargo, North Dakota. We strongly believe that it's helpful to talk to the parents and the families, and also work with the school teachers to ask them some basic questions about what problems or issues or hindrances and obstacles that children are getting into that they need help with. And then in the process of doing so, they can focus on something to help the kids and the parents, and then also to work with the churches, because people go to churches, and also you're very good support and volunteer, and also to involve some of the businesses so that they can fundraise, because I know working in North Dakota, you won't believe it, but the PTAs don't have money, and it's just interesting that we need to raise money, and one way to do it is through a lot of the community churches or even the businesses. The other thing which was very interesting is that they identify one or two people that they feel have responsibility and power to make some state legislation for the welfare of the children, and that's what they would work on, to have legislation on that basis.
Thank you very much. The first four principles are the context. Now I'm going to do the direct teach. The first four principles are the context for these two, and these are the winners. The key word is collective and sustainable. PTA has sustained itself over 100 years, 170, how many years? Yeah, in particular ways. The very first EMLC I attended was in Detroit. I was a brand new appointed board member. And what really moved me was one of the past presidents who walked us through a room through the history, the early history of PTA. Because the truth was, when I was appointed to the National Board of PTA, I saw PTA as a fundraising volunteer organization. And the Title I schools that I worked with, none of them had any kind of a parent organization. And at the same time, the families we were most connected to didn't have any time or interest in PTA as they understood it. But when I saw the courageous women in the 19th century who not only started this organization but battled for children's protection and suffrage and things like that, I said, wow. Victorian age women that were spit on by the men and they were out there organizing. Gives me goosebumps. Most of them happened to be white women that I saw there. The black women in that other organization that joined PTA at some point, and then there was a white flight from PTA. I said, whoa. At least that's the way I understood. Maybe it's my own biased interpretation. But I started seeing over time, as I was on the board, a huge, complex organization where a lot of brilliant women filigreed it into this elaborate organization with many things and many purposes because it's a membership organization. And when suburban leadership took over, there were suburban issues that I think were big. And all issues important and good, but this is huge. And coming from the point of the liberation of people of color attitude maybe, or social justice, whatever you call it, I was coming from, said out of all that, what can be salvaged right now with the families I'm working on whose kids are dropping out of school and they're failing algebra, whose families are embarrassed or afraid to go to the school. And every time I sat and heard the dog and pony show, no matter how fancy, how good, and with participatory activities sometimes, it was still that message that felt very middle class and white to me. And let alone forget my bias. The families I worked with weren't interested. So then these principles don't come from having sat down and thought about it and then doing it. These have emerged out of sweat and blood of 40 years in my organization, mine and many others. They have emerged from marches and arrests and people that lost their jobs because they just wanted to have more Latino teachers on the school. And we faced Texas Rangers standing there because the kids marched out of school with our support saying, you know, this is racist school, the majority of us are Mexican in this school, and you're treating us like inferior creatures. Like the Head Start teacher that I went to see, she happened to be white, and she said, I just love my little Spanish children. Totally unaware of what she was letting me know. And so, coming from that background, and I'm no longer an angry young man, I'm an angry old fart. But anyway, PTA really didn't make a sense, and I never had been a good board member. Ota put me on this committee, and I'm there, but you know, it's tough. I respect the history of the organization, but I really have slightly different focus and interests, and I come from a whole community that has different interests. So I went back to one grassroots organization and said, hey, I'm on the national board of PTA. One of my colleagues from California told me, did you sell out? Listen to that. A leader in bilingual ed in California asked me, Aurelio, did you sell out? I'm not saying that being part of PTA is selling out, it's that perception among advocates that are very near and dear to me, because they're put their you-know-what on the line too. And they're brilliant, they have PhDs, and they haven't forgot where they came from. So, this organization, next slide. These families in this organization live in these outposts, these not really suburbs, they're unincorporated communities called colonias. They're outside of the municipality, have very limited services. Majority of them are recent immigrants, speak very little English, dirt poor, but survivors. Looking past their shoulder, see if immigration isn't close by. They're here at great cost. They left their country because they were starving over there. And they always heard that the dollar over here that would help. They come and face terrible, terrible challenges. But one thing they want is their kids to get a good education. All of them. And those very schools their children attend, they're full of people as brown as they are, who are just one generation away from wearing shoes, are now educated, and talk about those kids from that neighborhood. Because you know, education to some of us gets in our brain. It's that piece that 40 years ago made me embarrassed about my dad's accent. That piece that was given to me that said, you don't talk one and you don't look like one. They expected a serape and a sí señor. And I believed that stuff for a while. So I'm not here as blameless, but I'm saying that those families, when you see them properly, are intelligent, strong, persistent. And one thing that's huge next to their faith is the education of their children. And so my organization and that organization have been partners for 15 years. So I go to the president of one of those centers, Lourdes, and I say, hey, you want to start a PTA? Get out of here. A year later, I go back, and Jan Wilkerson, the president, I asked Jan, look, if we start a bare bones PTA in a community organization, can I be go for it? So, took 2 years, and Lourdes said, okay, if we can run our meetings the way we run them, with our families, and our families are the officers, and our meetings are in Spanish, and you continue to tell us about education policy and practice in words we understand, we'll do it. So, 5 years ago, they were all English learners, outlying communities that are marginalized in their own communities. They formed the PTA Comunitario. The state changed it to Community PTA. Okay. Next slide. Here are some basic things about a community PTA. It illustrates the principles that we were talking about, the 6 principles. It's community-based. It is a grassroots community organization that, among other things, has education on the front burner. That was critical, because you know they're handling housing and immigrant rights and many health, other stuff. They have authentic family connections. These organizations have outreach workers that visit hundreds of families every week. They conduct classes in those homes. Those families come to meetings because it's a community that's connected. Dirt poor, but with huge assets. And because the organization and the people that work there come from that community, they don't have to study or think about the assets. They know them. They know they're there. And so in that context, we present to them, and have for years, here's some policy issues you need to know about. Just 2 weeks ago, I was presenting one meeting. The original group had an evening meeting so the dads could be. We had 100 people there. That's without counting the little ones. They made chicken mole for 150 people, and they ran out. Some people got seconds. Mole is a Mexican sauce that's unique in many parts of Mexico. Anyway, what I presented on was a questionnaire that they're going to take to their schools so that under the new rules, they make sure that the schools their kids are going to has a college focus and they're preparing their kids for college. Some of these ladies are illiterate in Spanish, and they're already asking tough questions. They're forming committees because the law is going to kick in next September. And they want to make sure that their kids aren't on some path that's really going to be a limited voc ed path. They're clear on that. They want to make sure that in 7th and 8th grade, they're getting pre-algebra and algebra, that they go to high school with at least 1 credit in algebra. They want to make sure that they're dual credit courses. Dual credit courses. College and high school credit for the poorest of the poor, for the most limited. The data, they take it, use it, and go with it. Obviously, my organization, as an advocacy organization, looks at the data and selects it in such a way that they understand how it's going to impact on their children. Because they already know the long history of tracking and what tracking has done to their children. But they also have one school district, the Far San Juan Alamo School District, PSJ, that the superintendent has decided that every graduating high school student is going to have at least 6 credit hours in college when they graduate. Last year, one of his high schools, half of them graduated with an Associate of Arts degree and their high school diploma from these neighborhoods. This is not a high school that is modified, that's transformed itself, a school district. And this organization is smack in the middle. They also cover other school districts, that one. And then they have committees and peer relationships with schools. We have already 2 PTAs. I'm a card-carrying PTA member of 2 of those PTAs. There's 2 others. They're still trying to get their paper accepted at the state and get that through. And by the end of the project we just got funded, we will have 5 new community PTAs in South Texas, in an area where there are very few PTAs. Now, This is where these principles are important, but they're challenging. I had presented on some of these things at our state conference several years in a row, and Lourdes and I decided to stop going because we'd get 10 to 15 people, and they really didn't understand it. Because when you come from a campus-based notion, even if you're Latino and African American, you are so immersed in the traditions of PTA, in those traditions. And number one, you take issue with somebody saying they might need different traditions, because it's like if I'm stepping on their good works, and no, continue those good works. But PTA, if you want to connect to advocates like us that are working from the grassroots up and things are popping up from the bottom, we need some other models, some other approaches. Because there's a huge market out there, I know. If membership is important to you guys, I don't know if it's important, but if membership is important, don't take the old dog and pony show and translate it into Spanish. It won't sell. It's about PTA going to the grassroots and learning from the grassroots the models that you need to survive in the 21st century. Because I think that line is still going down in terms of membership. Maybe not as much or as fast. The dilemma is that when the leaders from this PTA comunitaria get together with other traditional leaders, as we had a regional conference, the first bilingual one 2 years ago, and another one training that the state took to the region, there's the typical Chicana PTA mom is still saying, well, we had an event and those families didn't come. Those families didn't come. See, there's already that separation. Families have to come to PTA. Well, no, PTA is now in the community, meeting there regularly, and the newest one that's being formed is with a campus. But the Arise, the organization, took a memorandum of agreement to the principal saying, this is going to be a co-sponsored PTA. Some meetings will happen on campus, and some will happen in our center. And this community base that we're connected to will come. Some of the super parent volunteers there are wrinkling their nose at it. This is a whole new thing. They don't understand it. And they're the ones that have been already given prizes by the principal for their 100 hours volunteering. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that our principles of family leadership are foreign to them, not understandable to them, and we won't spend any time trying to convince them. Because we have 40 families that showed up to a meeting that used to average 10 families, and they were quite interested in the policy issues we were presenting. And the campus is trying to readjust to this, because they're coming and saying, now the vice principal asked those parents saying, we need a lot of help. They've cut the budget. Texas is in terrible times in terms of budgets. So if some of you could volunteer to help our teachers in the first grade, because we don't have any more teacher aides. The paraprofessionals have been cut out in the budget. They're the first to go. And some of the parents might do that, but they're also going to make sure that they keep, the community organization is going to keep those principles alive, because they want actionable data projects and they want community school peer relationship. So now it's with a memorandum of agreement. Next slide. I see this as challenges, and how much more time do we have? About 5 minutes? Okay, I was going to give another small group thing. Here are the challenges. Maybe we'll just do it large group. How do you start in the community? Because I'm not starting in PTA. And remember, it took some work from me, which is ironic because I had not started out as a pro-PTA person. When I saw that there might be some influence that the grassroots can have on PTA, that's when I decided to persist. So, how do you start in your communities? What grassroots organizations do you know of, or groups? Because if you start one from scratch, it's not going to work. You need somebody or something that's already there, that has deep tentacles into their own community, that already sees their community with respect, has done their own asset mapping and knows what the assets are from a very community point of view. We've got 3 ladies that are seamstress, and she can give a ride to people to school, and whatever exists. If any of you are familiar with the asset mapping notions, they're very healthy, especially when the community looks at itself and maps its own assets. And from that, a grassroots or community, or it might even be a local NAACP that has new blood in it, they want to do something about education. Or a LULAC group or somebody like that. Because all our organizations are pretty staid right now in terms of, they're certainly fighting for education policy for our kids. I'd like to light a bomb under LULAC right now. I formed a LULAC group and stuff like that because it's the oldest Latino civil rights organization. But we spend more time with our internal politics and raising money for scholarships than fighting policy, and we need to do all of those, you know? And I think NAACP has, you know, everybody, our histories, you know, there was a time when we had some real hell-raising leaders and we were out there, and then all of a sudden we get comfortable or tired or burnt out. But so we need to start in our communities and not take PTA to them, but go. The way I did it was, okay, you trust me, I've been working with you a long time, you know I won't steer you wrong. Would you be interested in starting a group of families within your organization who are interested in education, especially in the public schools that surround this community? And because their kids or their grandkids go to these schools, do you want to form an organization? And we can become a PTA. We'll just do it bare bones. And we can go then visit these campuses as an independent PTA, because you complained that your PTA was controlled by the principal and this one didn't have anything. Okay, let's start it here in our base where we're comfortable, and our meeting is going to be in Spanish. And Doña Chole from the corner can be the president, even if she can't read and write. That kind of stuff. And then from that base, saying, okay, here's PTA. And then inform state and national. Look at how this is evolving. This is how this is evolving. It's following the same principles. They agree with every child, one voice. They like those principles. But they want to look at practice and policy. Like how many communities, for example, have an over-representation of minority or people, students of color in disciplinary action? How many kids are being sent for any reason to those alternative campuses, those boot camps? And most of those kids happen to be African American or Latino, I think. What are the dropout rates in our school district, and what can we do about that? What's the quality of instruction our kids are getting? Do our kids have access to high-quality education? You know, and we might have to talk to the teachers' union or whatever, but, you know, the focus of the community, and that's a good PTA. Now, they might not ever want to be a regional president or the internal stuff of becoming, you know, an officer within PTA, but at the local level, they want to ensure and use the PTA logo to make sure that they have high-quality instruction, the kids are happy, they're learning, they're safe, and that's a good PTA. That's a good PTA. And that's why I'm a proud card-carrying PTA member. Now, there's still people that are thinking I lost it. Okay. But redefining leadership. There's nothing wrong with a super mom, but make sure that these families come together with the respect that anybody that has to raise children has for each other. Because, okay, raising kids is a piece of cake, right? And that compassion and support for each other, whether it's a single mom or it's a lawyer, just coming together. Because maybe they're all right up to the age of 13, but once they hit 13, you know. Because she wanted you to go to every meeting, and then all of a sudden, Mom, don't you dare kiss me in front of the school. Forget Dad, okay? So, let me ask you, which element of what I've been talking about is the most challenging for you? Is it a new paradigm? If it's old for you, then you've already been doing it. Yes, ma'am. You're with us.
Black Star Community PTA. It's a pleasure to meet you. I listened to your webinar. And so we started in the community with Black Star Project, which has been involved in education advocacy for almost 20 years. So a lot of this is really familiar to me. What I'm really happy to hear you talk about is not just the whole issue of race, because Chicago is very segregated. So if we're looking at community PTAs, we're talking about the West Side and South Side, where the population is predominantly black. But you do get some of this class issue that you're talking about, that those kids kind of thing, and those kids are the same color that we are. I mean, we started out with
But
an
I
issue.
went to better schools. When I go to the restroom, it smells like roses.
Exactly, exactly. So, and we started out on an issue that had to do with magnet schools, so of course that's going to appeal to the higher income people, but it felt as if we couldn't get beyond that, and it did start to feel like people were saying things like, well, you know, these people need to be better parents. That's what's wrong with the schools. If these people were better parents, and
Like
it
me,
felt like
yeah.
we couldn't move to the point where we were talking about making the schools better for everybody, not just the middle class parents. But you're right, that's where it needs to
Now,
start.
the
in
thing is, like,
community.
even magnet schools drain the best and the brightest to one campus, and what happens to the regular schools? You know? Okay. Thank you. No, I know Arnie has a lot to defend there, but, you know, Chicago, how many schools have been closing lately? And how many private companies are opening new schools that are called charter schools? Okay, I won't get into that right now. But the closer you are to your community and what's going on in your community, maybe it's a church group. Maybe there's this really progressive minister that has a group of in that church, in that parish, that want to do something. And you say, okay, let's see if we want to focus on the public education our kids are getting in those schools. Are there 20 families want to get together here? Yeah. Okay. Let's see what it is. Okay, we get 20 together. We get our articles of incorporation, our bylaws, our dues. Send it in, and let's start. They need help. Some will need help how to be a president, how to be a secretary, but bare bones. You need the minutes, the historian. Forget the parliamentarian. Don't worry about that. Not yet. 10 years from now. When I was in high school, I was elected parliamentarian my senior year, and never again have I wanted to see Robert's Rules of Order. But anyway, there's nothing wrong with the traditions of PTA. But in the communities I've come from and I'm talking about, okay, you go your way, I'll go mine. To have these two meet, and from a very practical point of view, to appeal to that market, not only the message has to be different, the listening has to be radically different. I can't go there to sell PTA. I go there to listen to what they want to do about their kids' education, if they're interested in their kids' education. And when the question is posed in an understandable way, you get 99% yes. And so that's a challenge. Leadership. Leadership. Leadership training focuses on the sharp individual, the verbal individual, the assertive individual. Leadership for this kind of an approach is collective, revolving. And that's what will make it sustainable. What happens when the charismatic leader falls or disappears? As long as we follow that charismatic leader angle, it's happened in all our communities. They die, they go bad, whatever. And so if we want the PTA Comunitario model, these principles are very important. Thank you very much for your interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Aurelio. Can we give him another hand for those words of wisdom? That's one thing I like about Aurelio. He keeps it real. We constantly preach family engagement, so it's critical throughout all our communities. And research show that when families are engaged, that students do better in school.